The people of Israel were fruitful and prolific in the land of Egypt. They multiplied and spread so that they filled the land. Now there arose in Egypt a Pharaoh who didn't know Joseph. And he said to his people, "Look, the people of Israel are more numerous and powerful than we are. Let us deal with them, lest they continue to increase, and in the event of war, side with our enemies, fight against us, and escape from the land." So the Egyptians placed taskmasters over the Israelites, who oppressed them with forced labor. They built supply cities for Pharaoh, Pithom and Ramesses. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and grew, so that the Egyptians began to dread the Israelites. The Egyptians were brutal in the tasks they imposed on them. They forced them to work in all kinds of field labor and in brick and mortar. They were brutal in the tasks they imposed on them. Pharaoh said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was Puah and the other Shiphrah, "When you act as midwives to the Hebrew women and see them on the birthing stool, if it's a boy, kill it. If it's a girl, well, she can live." Now the Hebrew midwives feared God. So they didn't do what the king of Egypt required. Rather, they let the boys live. Pharaoh summoned them and said to them, "Why have you done this, allowing the boys to live?" And the midwives said, "The Hebrew women, they're not like the Egyptian women. They're vigorous, and they give birth before the midwife gets there." So God dealt well with the midwives. And the people grew more numerous and stronger. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families. Pharaoh summoned his people and said to them, "Any boy that is born to the Hebrews, throw him in the Nile. If it's a girl, she can live." Now a man from the tribe of Levi married a Levite woman, and she conceived, and she gave birth to a son. La 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 la. When she saw that he was a fine baby, she hid him for 3 months. La 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 la. When she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket, plastered it with bitumen and pitch, and put him into it. And she placed the basket by the bank of the river among the reeds. And his little sister watched, or his sister watched from a distance to see what would happen to him. The daughter of Pharaoh came down to the river to bathe, and her attendants were walking beside the bank. When she saw the basket, she sent a servant to bring it to her. She opened it. She saw the child. He was crying, and she had compassion on it. She said, "Oh, look, this must be one of the Hebrew children." And his sister said, "Would you like me to get a nurse from among the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you?" And the daughter of Pharaoh said, "Yes." And so she went and got the child's own mother. And the daughter of Pharaoh said, "Take this child and nurse him for me, and I will pay you wages." So the mother took the child and nursed him. La 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 When the child had grown in years, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, who adopted him as her own son. And she said, "I will call his name Moses, Moshe, because I took him up, Moshe, out of the waters." Now, when Moses was grown, he went out to his people, and he saw their forced labor. He saw an Egyptian beating one of the Hebrews, his kinsfolk. And looking this way and that and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. The next day, when Moses came out, he saw two Hebrews brawling, and he said to the one who was in the wrong, "Why are you striking your fellow Hebrew?" And he said, "Who made you a ruler and judge over us? Do you mean to kill me like you killed the Egyptian?" And Moses was afraid and thought, "Oh no, the thing is known." And when Pharaoh heard about the thing, he sought to kill Moses. So Moses fled from Pharaoh and settled in the land of Midian. And he settled beside a well. The priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came to the well and drew water and filled the trough to water their flock. But some shepherds came and drove them away, and Moses rose, came to their defense, and even drew water and watered the flock. When the daughters had returned home, their father, Reuel, said to them, "How is it that you've come home so soon today?" And they said, "An Egyptian defended us against the shepherds." And he said, "Well, where is he? You left him there? Invite him to break bread." And so Moses came and settled in with the man. And he gave him one of his daughters, Zipporah, in marriage. And she gave birth to a son. And he named him Gershom, saying, "I have been a refugee in a strange land." Now, after some time had passed, the king of Egypt died, and the people of Israel groaned in their slavery and protested. And their protest, seeking help, rose up to God. And he heard their groanings, and he looked at the people of Israel, and he paid attention. Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. And he drove them deep into the desert. And he came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And there, Lord's angel appeared to him in a flame of fire out of a bush. And though the bush was burning, yet it wasn't consumed. And he said, "I must turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush isn't burning up." When Lord saw that he had turned aside, he called out from the bush to Moses, "Moses! Moses!" And he said, "Well, here I am." And God said, "Come no closer. Take off your sandals, the ground you're standing on is holy ground. And God said, I'm the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face because, well, he was afraid to look at God. And God said to him, the protest of my people Israel has risen to me. I have heard their cries. And so I have come down to take them out of that abuse and bring them to a new land, a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the country of the Canaanites, the Hittites, and the Amorites, the Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. I have heard the groaning of my people, and I too have seen their suffering. So, let's go. I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people out of Egypt. And Moses said, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and lead your people out of Egypt? And God said, I am going with you. And this will be the sign that I am sending you. Once you've taken the people out of captivity, you will worship God on this mountain. So, Moses said to him, but what if I come to the people of Israel and say to them, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you, and they say, well, what's his name? What'll I say to them? And God said, Heye Asher Eye. I am who I am. Thus you shall say to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. Thus you shall say to the people of Israel, the Lord, God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and my title throughout all generations. Go and gather the leaders of Israel and say to them, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob, has appeared to me, saying, I have paid attention to the suffering of my people in Israel. I have heard their groaning on account of their taskmasters. And so I'm going to take them up out of that abuse and bring them to the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. They will listen to you. And you and the elders of Israel will go to the king of Egypt and say to him, Lord, the God of the Hebrews has appeared to us. Let us go 3 days' journey into the desert so that we might sacrifice to Lord. Now I know that the king of Egypt won't let you go unless compelled by a mighty hand. Therefore, I will stretch out my hand and strike the Egyptians with the signs that I will perform in it. Only then will he let you go. And I will cause the Israelites to come into such favor with the Egyptians that each woman will say to her neighbor, and any woman living in her neighbor's house, give me jewelry of gold and silver and clothing, and you will put them on your children. Thus you shall plunder the people of Egypt. And Moses said, Lord, my Lord, but what if they don't believe me or listen to me, but say, well, the Lord didn't appear to you? And God said to him, what's that in your hand? And he said, it's a staff. He said, throw it on the ground. So he threw it on the ground, and it became a snake, and he jumped back. And God said, stretch out your hand and grasp it by the tail. And Moses stretched out his hand and grasped it, and it became a staff in his hand. And God said, so that they might believe that the God of their ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent you to them. And he said, put your hand inside your cloak. And he put his hand inside his cloak. And when he took it out, it was pale, as white as snow. And God said, put it back in your coat. And he put it in his cloak. And when he took it out, it was darkened again, just like the rest of his body. And God said, if they won't believe you because of the first sign, maybe they'll believe you because of the second sign and pay attention to you. And if they won't believe you and pay attention to you because of these two signs, then you shall take some water from the Nile and put it on the dry ground. And the water that you take from the Nile will become blood on the dry ground. And Moses said, oh my, Lord, I am not an eloquent man. I was not before, nor am I now that you've spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. And the Lord said, who gives speech to mortals? Who makes deaf or mute, seeing or blind? I am not the one, Lord. I am going with you, and I will speak to your mouth. And Moses said, just send somebody else. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses. And he said, what about your brother Aaron the Levite? I know he speaks fluently. He's coming to you even now, and when he sees you, his heart will be glad. You will speak to him and tell him what to say. I will be with his mouth and with your mouth, and I will tell you both what you are to say. You will speak to him the words he's to announce. He will be before the people a mouth for you, and you will be like God for him. Now, take the staff in your hand with which you are to perform the signs and go. So Moses took the staff and went. Now it came to pass, after some time, that Lord had kept the promises to Moses. And the people of Israel found themselves in freedom, out of slavery, on the other side of the Red Sea. And just as the story began with the courage of women, so now a kinswoman of Moses, Miriam the prophet, Miriam the sister of Aaron, took her tambourine. And all the women came with tambourines and dancing, and Miriam sang to them, I will sing unto our Lord, who's triumphed gloriously. Lord has thrown the horse and rider into the Red Sea. This is the story of our people. And what a story it is.